My name is Jonathan Bowman. For those of you who don't know me, we've only been here like about 8 months, and I've spoken here I think twice on a Wednesday night, so I may be new to you. This is my wife up front, Jessica, and she's here so I could point at her and tell you she's my wife, I guess. So anyway, but we're going to continue our study in Exodus chapter 19 tonight. Before that, we'll go ahead and open up with a time of prayer. I do ask that you pray for me. I've got to take my family to Legoland tomorrow for 2 days. So just pray for patience, bad weather. No, I'm just kidding.
Be sure you wear shoes.
Do what? Yeah, I'll wear shoes. That's not a problem. I mean, I used to live in South Arkansas, but I wear shoes now. All right. Well, let's go, Lord, in prayer, and we'll have a good time studying His Word tonight. Let's pray. Dear Lord, just thank you for the fact that we can approach you, Lord, that we know you, that you hear our prayers, that you love us, that you've forgiven us, that we have fellowship with you. God, I do pray that we wouldn't take that relationship that we have with you for granted. I pray that we would enjoy the hearing of your word, and that it wouldn't be simply Bible study, but that we would just pause, take time out and think about what a privilege it is to get to open up and read your word. God, I just pray that you would just lead and guide us this evening. Help us to draw closer as your body, the body of Christ, and just closer to you. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, well, if you would open up your Bibles to Exodus chapter 19, and we're going to talk a little bit about Sinai. I'm going to read the entire chapter first, and then how I like to teach, at least in a setting like this, is I like to kind of go through the chapter in a verse-by-verse sort of format, and then after that, I'll preach the points that come out from going through it. Does that make sense? All right, so if you just want some really good preaching, just wait like half an hour. And then maybe it'll be decent. I don't know. It could be good. We'll see. All right, but Exodus chapter 19, beginning in verse 1. It says this. It says, "On the third new moon, after the people of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. They set out from Rephidim and came into the wilderness of Sinai, and they encamped in the wilderness. There Israel encamped before the mountain, while Moses went up to God. The Lord called to him out of the mountain, saying, 'Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice, and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel.' So Moses came and called the elders of the people and set before them all these words that the Lord had commanded him. And the people answered together and said, 'All that the Lord has spoken we will do.' And Moses reported the words of the people to the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, 'Behold, I am coming to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also believe you forever.' Then Moses told the words of the people to the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, 'Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments and be ready for the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai and the sight of all people, and you shall set limits for the people all around, saying, Take care not to go up into the mountain or touch the edge of it. Whoever touches the mountain will be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall be stoned or shot. Whether beast or man, he shall not live. When the trumpet sounds a long blast, they shall come up to the mountain.' So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and consecrated the people. And they washed their garments, and he said to the people, 'Be ready for the third day. Do not go near a woman.' On the morning of the third day there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast, so that all the people in the camp trembled. Then Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they took their stand at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke, because the Lord had descended on it in fire. The smoke of it went up like the smoke of a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled greatly. And as the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him in thunder. The Lord came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. And the Lord said to Moses, 'Go down and warn the people, lest they break through to the Lord to look at many of them perish. Also let the priests who come near to the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out against them. And Moses said to the Lord, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you yourself warned us, saying, set limits around the mountain and consecrate it. And the Lord said to him, go down and come up, bringing Aaron with you, but do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to the Lord, lest he break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and told them. I cited a title for tonight's talk, might be God Condescends, but then I figured some of y'all wouldn't get it. See, that was a joke, condescending. But it's more about God's advent or God's coming. And what we see here is a bunch of interesting things. And like I said, I'm going to start at the very beginning and try to sort of walk a little bit through the passage. The first thing in verse 1 through 3, we see that it was on the third month, or on the third month after they had left Egypt, that they came up to the mountain. And the Bible says that on that very day that they came, that Moses went up. So as soon as they get to the mountain, Moses goes up. And why is Moses so eager to go up? Well, number one, he's eager because he gets to meet with the Lord. But number two, this is a fulfillment of God's promise to Moses. Y'all been studying Exodus for several weeks now, and in Exodus chapter 3, verse 11 through 12, Moses says to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people up out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. And so Moses goes up at this mountain eagerly because he's excited, because what God has called him to do, what God promised him that would occur, it has occurred. And he goes to meet with God. And in this passage, he'll go to meet with God about 3 times. It also says that Yahweh, or it communicates to us that the Lord, sorry I said Yahweh, but the Lord is just as eager to be present and meet the people as they are to meet him. It says that, again, that immediately when they arrived, that the Lord called out to him of the mountain. It wasn't a delayed call, but when they got there, God called out to Moses. One of the things that we need to see here, and that we've seen all along through Exodus, is God that always initiates contact with people. It's never the other way around. It's probably one of the most confusing things that, or I think that has confused a lot of believers, and that's why I think we stay away somewhat from this concept as a church that if you walk an aisle and pray a prayer, you will be saved. Why? Because true salvation comes at God's initiation. It doesn't come at yours. You can do anything you want to do, but we have no control over God, and God's always going to start his relationship with you when he wants to and at his time. I also want to see here that when God calls Moses, it says actually 7 times in this passage that the Lord called to him, or the Lord called to him. And when God calls to him, Moses has a task. And Moses' task as a mediator between God and Israel is pretty simple: to know God's words and then to repeat them exactly what he's heard them. And I think that could be another stopping point for us later on, that if we're to represent the Lord of the world, we need to know his word so that we can speak to other people what God's word has said. He says these words in verse 3. He says, thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the people of Israel. Well, why is that important? Well, it's important for several reasons. First, his communication is not only to the house of Jacob, but it's to the people or the nation of Israel. You see, here soon on, he's going to give them a choice. He's going to continue what he started through Abraham, but just like he promised Abraham, he's going to make himself known to other peoples and other nations. It's important for us to realize that Israel didn't become a nation until they agreed with this covenant on Mount Sinai. Before that, God's promises were just to Abraham and his descendants. But as the story of Exodus makes clear, whenever they leave Egypt, there's people of other ethnicities, other nations that go up with them. The Egyptians, after all, had slaves from the Mediterranean area, what we think of European area. The Egyptians had slaves from the African area. The Egyptians had slaves from Middle Eastern areas. And so when some of the slaves are set free, the Bible makes clear that other nations go up with them. Other people that we would call God-fearers in the New Testament went up with the Israelites to the mountain. And it's that mixture of people that God is going to extend his promises to and make them into a nation. In verse 4 it says, "You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself." When God first speaks, what God does is he reminds them of what he has done, right? God wants to remind the people that they have witnessed his works, and he wants to remind them of his works. Remember what I've done for you. Remember what I've brought you through. And then he makes this statement, "I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself." Eagle's wings in the Bible is a metaphor of protection, but it's also a metaphor of comfort. We read in Deuteronomy, and it's important to remember that Genesis through Deuteronomy is one book, right? It's one book. So when you study it, you can study it as one book. But in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 10 through 11, the Lord says this. It says, "He found him in a desert land," this speaking of Israel, "and in the howling wastes of the wilderness he encircled him. He cared for him. He kept them as the apple of his eye, like an eagle that stirs up its nest, that flutters over its young, spreading out its wings, catching them, bearing them on its pinions. The Lord alone guided him. No foreign God was with him." So God says, I want you to remember what I've done, that I bore you out. I took you out on eagle's wings. So I'm your protector, right? And provider. I'm your shelter. And he says this, I brought you to myself. In other words, it's my intention that brought you to this mountain. You didn't just wander somehow along the way and oops, there's a mountain. Well, look, God's there and he's calling to us. You know, that's not what occurred. God brought them intentionally to this place where he could speak with them. In verse 5, he says, "Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you will be my treasured possession among all the peoples. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel." Well, God says, offers them here to obey his voice, and then and to keep his covenant. You know, and what covenant is he talking about? Well, I don't think he's talking about the Mosaic covenant. That hasn't been instituted yet. But he's saying, again, the promises that I made to Abraham. If you obey me, I will keep the promises that I made to Abraham. And when he says obey, this isn't about obedience so that they can earn the promises that he made to Abraham, right? God has already made his promises to Abraham that he would have land, that his people would be blessed, that he would have many descendants, right? God has already made those promises. But here the offer is, I expect you to obey in light of what I've done for you. Because of what I've done for you, because I have delivered you, remember all the things that I brought you out of. Now I expect you to be obedient and faithful to me. And again, I think that this is a very New Testament teaching as well. Because of what Jesus Christ has done for you, because of what God has done for you, that is why we are called to be obedient. He calls them several things. First of all, he says that they are his special treasure, a unique and exclusive possession. He says, "You shall be my treasured possession among all peoples." And when you think about this word treasure, it was used back in this time to refer to a special possessed treasure. It's almost like a collector. You know, I don't know if you collect anything. I've never collected much because I don't have the attention span to really focus on one set of objects, right? Like I like this, and I like this, and I like this, and I like this, you know? So I don't really collect much. Well, maybe books. Yeah, okay. But maybe books. All right. But here he's saying, like, you are my special collection, right? So if you do collect anything, this is like the key piece, the number one thing in your collection that you want to show off and let everybody know about, right? And why are they God's special treasured possession? Why? Because he chose them. He says, "For all the earth is mine." So you are a possession among all the peoples, and all the earth is mine, but I chose you among all the peoples. God can do what he wants, right? And so he's chosen them. Why? Because it's his pleasure to choose them. He says, you will be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. This word kingdom of priests, first of all, he's pretty emphatic. He says, actually in the Hebrew text, he says, you yourselves will be to me. And there's no need to repeat that, but he really wants them to hear him, right? You yourselves will be to me. And he uses this terminology. He calls them a kingdom of priests. You know, kingdom of priests is a little confusing because it's not found anywhere else in the Old Testament. And it's also this exact phrasing of it isn't found anywhere else in ancient literature. And so there's some debate about exactly what this means. Does it refer to, I want you to be a kingdom that is set apart like a priesthood? Is it just those who worship the Lord? Is it kings who in some way function as priests? But if you remember, at this time, Israel didn't have kings, right? And they weren't supposed to have kings, right? Their choosing a king was a real problem. It did not go well for them when they chose a king. Instead, what God's saying is, you are going to serve a priestly function by being my kingly representatives, right? So we see this even in the garden, right? What does it mean to be made in God's image? Well, an image was a statue that marked the boundaries of a kingdom. And so whenever, it's this Hebrew word Salem, and so whenever you crossed a boundary or were in another city, you would find there often an image or a statue of the king. And so God's called people to be his image bearers. In other words, we're supposed to be a witness of what God is like in the world around us. That is our purpose, to know God, because you can't make him known or be his witness if you don't know him. So to know God and to make him known through who we are his image bearers. And it's really the same thing here, that I'm calling you as a nation, you together as a corporate nation will be my kingdomly priests, right? You will be my royal priestly representatives everywhere I go. And this concept is also in the tabernacle. If you ever studied the tabernacle, that's coming up soon. He's got to give instructions for that. But in the tabernacle is gold, blue, and bright colored threads in the outside walls of it. Once you get on the inside, the outside's covered with different skins to protect it. But it's all these different threads. The tabernacle on the inside is gold. The tabernacle on the inside has jewels. And what do you see the priest? Well, the priest is decked out in the colors of the tabernacle. Because the issue is, wherever the priest goes, the tabernacle is kind of going with him. Like he's a representative of taking the sacred space of the tabernacle with him. But here God's saying, you're going to do that through the entire nation. You're going to show what I'm like. He also calls them a holy people. A holy people. And what does it mean to be holy? That's sort of asking, like, what does it mean to be God? Holiness is just what God is. And it normally relates to, at least in our minds, and in some instances it relates to his moral character. His good, true, perfect moral character. It is just God's nature to be holy. And holiness, of course, if you study the Bible, holiness is just the exact opposite of what we are. So how are they going to be a holy people? Well, because how they live, again, they're priestly, kingly representatives as a nation of who God is. And so how they live is going to set them apart. And this is important because sometimes Old Testament laws can become confusing, like why didn't they eat shellfish, or why could they only wear fabric made of one type of thread, you know? Why are these rules? Well, the point is because you're just supposed to be different, okay? So that people will say, well, why don't you eat shellfish? Well, because I follow Yahweh. Why do you just wear one fabric and not mix? That's a weird rule. Well, it just sets me apart. I'm a follower of Yahweh, right? They're supposed to look different, act different, and be different so that they can give people's attention to the Lord. All right. In verse 7 through 8, he said, so Moses came and called the elders of the people and set before them all these words that the Lord had commanded him. So Moses hears what God is saying, and he's faithful to communicate it. And he says, all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. And that's a really great promise for right now. Mark's even smiling. But if you know, a couple chapters later, that just goes completely out the wayside, right? But for right now, they're saying, all the Lord has spoken, we will do. And so Moses reported the words of the people to the Lord, and the Lord said to Moses, because I'm coming to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also believe you forever. And this wouldn't be so unusual for the Israelites. If you remember the Exodus, God often led them by night through fire, and by the day in the form of a cloud. So they're just thinking, okay, well, God will just show up in a cloud. We've seen that before, maybe no big deal. It'll be like the other times that we've seen the cloud. And then he goes on to say, at the end of verse 9, when Moses told the words of the people to the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments, and be ready for the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. And you shall set limits for the people all around, saying, take care not to go up into the mountain or touch the edge of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. And so we see like part of consecration, and we're not 100% sure why, but involved, if they were going to approach God, they needed to wash their clothes. It's this concept of God is so other than I am. He's so pure. If I'm going to meet him, it might not make any sense, but I feel the need to even just wash my clothing, right? There's a weird sort of dirtiness to me, and not only to me, but to what I'm wearing, to where I need to get something clean. And so they do that. They're commanded not to go near the mountain or to even touch it. They're not allowed to touch the mountain, and if they do touch it, they will die. Again, why? Because God is holy, and when God's holiness is on an object, that for some reason, we don't know why, but that holiness is transferred to that object, and you don't touch that object, or else God will strike you down. Because we are just so unlike God, that really in our heart of hearts, we're anti-God in many ways. And so we can't, or they couldn't anyway, come into close contact with him. It says that not only you'll die, but you'll die by either being shot or stoned, right? So we're either going to throw rocks at you from a distance because we don't want to touch you because God's cursed you, or we're going to shoot you with an arrow from a distance because we don't want to touch you because God's cursed you. So because God's cursed you, we're not, even the way we kill you is going to be standoffish, right? We don't want to have anything to do with you if you're going to break the command of the Lord. And then he says this, when the trumpet sounds a long blast, they will come up to the mountain. So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and consecrated the people and washed their garments. And he said to the people, be ready for the third day, and do not go near a woman. There's a couple of things here. The first thing is this mention of a third day. And the third day in the Old Testament always refers to anticipation. If you do a word study on third day, it's always something of an anticipation or something of a surprise. It's not always a good surprise in a lot of stories, but it's anticipation or a surprise, right? And so Jesus' resurrection on third day, of course, makes perfect sense to an Israel mind. Why? Because a lot of times God anticipates and waits and has things occur on the third day in anticipation. And then he makes this other command, don't go near a woman. I thought about making a comment about that, but my wife is here. But it basically it's a Hebrew way of saying, don't have relations. And why would that be the case? And I think that this is somewhat important. There's nothing, of course, sinful in male-female relations in and of themselves, right? God's created those. God has made that. It's a normal human function. But there's something in the Levitical law that still requires us when we participate in those activities, or required them when they participate in those activities, to make sacrifice at times, and at times just to isolate themselves. And why would that be? Well, it's because we have a life cycle. We're mortal. God is not. We expend energy. God doesn't. And so this is another way of setting aside a time, like the New Testament commands, not to come together for a time, but to focus on the Lord, right? And so this is yet another reminder that even in our basic biological function, that we're so unlike God. God is completely other. completely other than us. And it says on the morning of the third day that there were thunders and lightnings. So thunders, or many thunders, and lightnings. And there's a plural here, and it plural in Hebrew means that it's the most that it could be. Like it's the best, the most intense thunder and lightning that you've ever experienced. If you've ever been in the mountains and are in thunder and lightning storm, it is way different than being a lot of times wherever we are, which is like sea level, I guess, basically. But being on the mountain during a thunderstorm, it's way different. But in Hebrew, there's no way to say greatest or the best, right? So you use the plural. So this is the most intense thunder and lightning that you could think of. And then it says there was a thick cloud on the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast, so that all the people in the camp trembled. What's interesting here is it doesn't say that anybody blew the trumpet, right? It said that there was going to be a trumpet blast, but it didn't say anybody blew it. So God makes the trumpet blast occur. Another interesting thing here is this notion of a thick smoke. And again, we'll see this in the tabernacle. Why? Because the tabernacle reflects what happens on the mountain, right? It's not like the mountain is sitting here reflecting what occurs in the tabernacle. The point of the tabernacle is to reflect what has occurred on the mountain. And so when you go to the tabernacle to worship, if the priest is going to enter into the Holy of Holies, there's incense burning. Why? Because he should never even get close. Like the priest is as standoffish to holiness as he could get, because it'll kill him. You know, to look at the Lord will kill the priest. And so they burn incense, and if you go in the Holy of Holies, whenever they did this one time a year, there was a smoke incense filling up the room. Why? To guard you from the presence of the Lord. And so the same thing is happening here. There's a smoke that's covering the mountain. Why? It's for the people's own good. It's for their own protection. You wouldn't want to see or come close to seeing the presence of the Lord. It says, the sound of the trumpet grew louder in verse 19, that Moses spoke and God answered him in thunder. And the trumpet growing louder isn't just like a stationary trumpet. The way it's worded in Hebrew, it's not a stationary trumpet where somebody just goes burp, 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 like louder and louder and louder. It is the sound of a trumpet blast that is coming closer and closer and closer and closer to you, right? It is a sound of announcing God's descending presence. And in verse 20, it says that the Lord came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. And the Lord said to Moses, go down and warn the people lest they break through to the Lord, and look, and many of them perish. So again, go warn the people again. And you're like, why would God repeat this instruction here? He's already told them. Well, if you know anything about the Israelites, repeated instruction is a really, really good thing, just like it is for us. That's why we come to church on Sundays and Wednesdays, is because we're not really if we admit it, we're not really very good in the shallow end of the Christian pool, right? We're not very good at the basics. And so we need to hear over and over again the gospel. We need to hear over and over again how God would want us to live. And so God is telling Moses, hey, go warn them one more time, because I don't want them to think just because the trumpet's blasted and I'm here now, that now I'm approachable, right? Because in the first command it says when you hear the trumpet blast, you can come up to the mountain. Well, the trumpet's blasted, we're here at the mountain, maybe I'll just, maybe I can approach the mountain now. And God, to protect them, tells Moses to warn them again. And then he says, let the priests who come near the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out against them. And this is confusing, or has been confusing for Old Testament scholars. Why? Because Israelites didn't have priests at this time, right? That sort of worship hasn't been instituted yet. And so, of course, liberal scholars, because they, don't believe this in the first place, they'll say, well, this is a later addition to the text, and obviously it's a later note, a later addition to sort of amplify the story, to make it more sense and even make it greater in the Hebrew mind. But you need to remember that he's also called them like a kingdom of priests, right? And he's talked to the elders of the church, and so some of them are serving in a somewhat of a priestly function. Now, they're not necessarily making sacrifices yet, but they are being representatives of God to the people. So it's Moses, the elders, and then the people. And so he's warning them, again, as representatives, don't come up here. And Moses said to the Lord, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you yourself warned us, saying, set the limits around the mountain and consecrate it. So Moses is reminding God, because God needs reminding, like, hey, God, this is what you just said. So why should I need to tell them again? That's how it comes across. And then it says again, the Lord said to him, go down, right, do what I said, and come bringing up Aaron with you, but do not let the priests or the people break through and come up to the Lord, lest you break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and told them. So again, God reiterates his warning, and in reiterating his warning, he's also reminding them of his holiness, right? He's saying, I have to warn you multiple times, don't come near me, don't approach me, don't come near me, don't be casual with me, because I'm holy. And Moses alone is summoned to the top. And then if you go on to read later, in a few chapters, there's Moses at the top. Aaron kind of gets to go close. There's the elders eating food on the mountain, which is why there's showbread in the tabernacle. And at the base of the mountain, there's all the people are there. So there's a threefold division of approaching God on the mountain. Well, that's a lot of good information. So what does that all boil down to? Well, here's what I'm going to try to start actually doing some preaching. First thing we need to see out of this is that God is present. And I want to say that again, because I don't really think that we believe this at all times in our lives. God is present. And He really is there at all times and at all places in your life. And let me say, it doesn't matter if you're a believer or a non-believer. God is always present and aware of you at all places, at all times in your life. There's a question sometimes that we have, like even as believers, well, why doesn't God make Himself more present? Why isn't God there even more so? Why doesn't God spell His name out in the stars, like Yahweh, or why isn't God inscribed on all of our cells and stuff? Why doesn't He make Himself more known? Well, because God doesn't just desire for you to know that He's present. He wants you to know that He's personal. He wants you to know that He's personal. Someone said once that prayer is communication with God, and I think that's too broad of a definition. Why? Because everybody is communicating with God all day long, every day. And you're communicating something to the Lord all day long, every day, whether you're using words or not. Sometimes my kids will like to try to be slick whenever I catch them doing something. Not me, I never do anything wrong, number one. But my kids will try to do something to try to be really smooth to get out of a situation whenever I catch them doing something where I correct them. And what they'll do, and oftentimes this has happened a few times while I'm driving the car, I'll look back and I'll correct somebody, and I'll look back and out of my rearview mirror, I see this. Just eye rolls, And they promise that they don't know they're doing it, and sometimes that may be true. But here's how they try to be slick. They'll say something like, well, but Dad, I didn't say anything, right? And I'll say, well, you didn't have to say anything, right? It was written all over your face, right? It was written all over your attitude. It was written all over your body language. And I think it's important for us to remember that God is present with us whether we think that we're communicating with Him at that moment or not. The second thing I think we get from this is that God is personal. God just didn't want to get them to the mountain so He could show off, right? He didn't get them to the mountain just so He could be like, hey, look, I'm God, look what I can do. That's not what He did. God got them to the mountain because He was interested in forming a covenant relationship with these people. With these people. He is personal. God's being personal is something that we have to prioritize. J.I. Packer said once that so many in our day seem to have been distracted from what was and always will be the true priority for every human being, and that is learning to know God in Christ. Knowing Him, spending time with the Lord, making it personal. You know, some of y'all may have read some systematic theology books, and that's great. You know, I enjoy some systematic theology myself. I'm not going to list you all the authors because it's really not that important. I don't think most of them are very good, but I just might be prideful, I don't know. But aren't you glad that the Bible isn't a systematic theology book? The Bible is a record of what God has done in history through the lives of people. And it's a record of God repairing what we have done by breaking our relationship through our sin with the Lord. And we need to remember, as God called himself to the Israelites, he said, I am brought you up like on eagle's wings. I've brought you out like on eagle's wings. And that image right there is of a God who protects us and who provides for us. He is active in our lives at all times. God is also a promise keeper. So God is present, God is personal. I'm doing the Baptist thing where I use the same letter, right? God is a promise keeper. He keeps his promises. You know, if we read this passage that God kept his promise to Moses, that Moses would be used by him to deliver his people. And God said, I will see you again on this mountain. He kept his promise. God calls his people to remember what he's done to set them free. And when God first, in Exodus, when God first hears the cries of the Israelites, it says that God remembers his covenant promises that he made with Abraham, that he made with Isaac, that he made with Jacob. God keeps his promises. What is the last promise that you've made to someone? Yes, honey, I'll take the trash out after dinner. I promise you'll get a promotion next time around. I'll be there on time. I promise. I promise that we're always going to love each other. When's the last time you've made a promise? When's the last time you've broken a promise? You know, a few weeks ago, the children's choir sang in church, and my kids are really excited about it. They got amped up about it. And I told them, hey, I'm going to be there at 11 o'clock. Daddy's busy at 8 o'clock service, and he's busy at 9:30 service. But I'm going to be there at 11 o'clock service to watch you. Well, something came up in work on that Sunday, and I missed the 11 o'clock service. And I go to the car, and my kids are crying because, in a way, it was good because they were telling me, you always say you're going to be there and you're there. But I also just felt terrible because this time I wasn't there. I wasn't there. And that's a small thing, but keeping your promises or breaking your promises says something about how you value the other person. It says something about how the promise keeper values the one to whom the promises is made. It's not just about trust, although trust is certainly a part of it, but it's you're important enough to me that what I said I'm going to do, I'm going to do. God has kept all of his promises. And I want you to think about that. What does that mean about what God thinks about the humans that he's created in his image? That means that he loves us. That means that he values you. It also means that you can, no matter the circumstance, always trust him. Always trust him. A lot of times we have a problem with God. It's not because he's broken a promise, but it's because we've laid on him something he didn't promise in the first place. You know, this especially, I think, is true of when it comes to the old problem of suffering. Why didn't so-and-so get sick? Why did so-and-so have to die? They were so young. They were so vibrant. Why did this have to happen to this relationship? Or why did this have to happen to my dream? Well, be careful, because God didn't promise you those things. But what He did promise the believer was Himself, and knowing Him and being with Him forever. You know, a good friend of mine had a child that, a baby that was born too early. And, you know, I was premature. I weighed about, 3 pounds, 12 ounces when I was born, something like that. My dad used to like to say I made up for it. All right, but I was premature, and so I went to visit my friend David. I went to go visit his son, and his son was in the NICU. It was one of the situations where they couldn't hold their son, they couldn't be close to their son. And so I went down, and I just remember praying over this baby. God, please heal this baby. You know, God, please take care of this baby. And then I get a phone call a week later that David's son had died. And then I went to the funeral, and there's this itty-bitty casket. And you go to the graveside, and there's all these other baby graves with toys that parents feel the need to drop off for their kids throughout the years, just to remember them. And I remember my friend David saying, that the goal of every Christian dad is to get their kids to Jesus. And his son was with Jesus. And God kept His promise. You know, do we have that mindset? Are we aware of how faithful God is and how often He's kept His promises? You know, the Bible says that God is protector. Again, this concept of eagle's wings. And really, you know, we need to remember that God doesn't have a gender, right? God's not male nor female. So sometimes the Bible describes God in a masculine language. Sometimes the Bible describes God in feminine language. That might strike a nerve because all the transgenderism stuff going on here, but I think what that shows us is even people in their sin, they're trying to be genderless like God is. They're still trying to be like God. Just like Adam and Eve were trying to be like God. But the point that I want to make here is that it describes God not only in eagle's wings in terms of being a protector, but also in terms of being a mother eagle who will gather all of its young underneath her wings and protect them. You know, Jesus said this in His words. He said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. I would often love to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, but you were not willing. God is protector. But God's main protection for us isn't just physical protection. And if you look at our prayer list on Wednesday nights, often we seem to somehow have that as the goal. Really, if you study a lot of churches' prayer lists, we somehow think that we're just always going to kind of get healed and live forever. I don't know why we think that, because history shows that that never happens unless you're Jesus, right? But God's ultimate protection for all of us is the good news of Jesus Christ. The ultimate protection that God has given mankind is the gospel. Because if you know Jesus Christ, if you know that you're going to be with Him forever, if you know that you're going to be part of the new kingdom and the new earth, no matter what you're going through, listen, you're protected. You're protected. That insurance was bought, covered, paid for on the cross. And nobody can revoke it. The other thing that I want us to see that is that God is pure. God is pure. And I think that a lot of times in our culture especially, listen, our culture struggles with purity. It struggles with purity. But God is pure. Remember that there are angels that encircle Him, and they never stop saying, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The whole earth is filled with His glory. God is perfectly good. And so because of that, and because of what Christ has done, yes, we can approach God. We'll get into that in a minute, but we can approach God. But listen, I never want to be flippant in my approach to the Lord. I never want to be just casual in my approach to God. You know, sometimes when I go to pray, I will sit there and I will be quiet until it really hits me who it is that I'm talking to. And then I'll talk. You know, I don't always do that because I'm a human being, and sometimes I'll just go to God and I'll just complain, you know. Or sometimes I'll be too casual with the Lord. But listen, I encourage all of us, sometimes when we pray, you need to pause and think about who it is that you're praying to. When you're in worship, you need to pause and think about who it is you're singing songs to. You know, I learned a lot about freedom in worship by being on the mission field because everybody else was dancing and having a tambourine, and I was not, all right? So I would just stand there like this because that was my tradition, and they would dance around the tambourine because that was their tradition, right? And as I did that for a few years of my life, I began to discover that really good worship means like, I'm not really paying much attention to what you're doing, and if you want to worship God that way, that's cool, go ahead and do it. You're not really paying much attention to what I'm doing because I'm worshiping God how He's designed me, and so I'll do it that way. And so sometimes in church, I will sit down while everybody else is standing up singing. And what I don't like about this is that 9 times out of 10, somebody will come up and pat me on the back and be like, "Are you okay, Jonathan?" Like they'll think I'm emotional, you know, or super spiritual, and they'll want to get in on it so they can be super spiritual too, you know. But a lot of times I'm just sitting down because I am thinking about the fact that I do not mean what I'm singing just now, and I'm not about to sing it. I'm not about to open my mouth and sing those words to the Lord if I don't mean them right then. I'm not about to open my mouth and sing a song to God that I haven't contemplated up, or if I hadn't lived my life in a certain way before I come to worship. God deserves my best. He deserves for me to be focused. He deserves for me to not say vain words, right? Like the pagans do. Just repeating stuff because everybody else is repeating it. But to be truly focused on Him. We need to approach with caution. You know, a good illustration of this is there's this story, I don't know, you might have heard it, about this guy in Naples who thought he'd walk up to a tiger, you know. And it was at the Naples Zoo a few months ago. And I don't know what gets in the head of somebody who thinks, I mean, maybe you've watched too much Discovery Channel, maybe you haven't watched enough Discovery Channel, maybe your only exposure to tiger has been like Daniel Tiger or something, you know, the little kids show. I don't know. But what gets into somebody's head, just because a tiger is in a cage does not mean that it's tame. Matter of fact, that most likely means it's not tame because it's in a cage, right? And I'll just say this, like God knows us, He knows me, and He's forgiven me, and I have forgiveness in Christ, but we should never forget that we are completely other than what He is. And anytime somebody comes face to face with the Lord in the Bible, they're not running up to Him to give Him a big hug because they're their granddaddy. They're usually struck with fear until He has to calm them down. And so we need to approach the Lord with reverence. One of the things the New Testament teaches, though, is what's our hope as believers? Well, number one is that there's a greater Moses. There's a greater Moses, and there was a greater meeting on the mountain. That's part of what happens in the Gospel of Matthew, is that Jesus goes up on a mountain and He takes people with Him. The people don't have to, the disciples, Peter, James, and John, they don't have to stand at the base while Jesus goes up top. Jesus goes to the top of a mountain and He says, because of who I am, I'm going to take you with me. Why? Because it's my good pleasure to do so, and I can do what I want. And then whenever we see Moses meeting with God on the mountain again, it's Moses meeting with the incarnate Jesus Christ on the Mountain of Transfiguration, and Elijah is there too. And the disciples are so awestruck because they cannot believe that they get to be a part of this moment. But what the author of Matthew is communicating is that Jesus is a greater, better Moses. He's more than Moses, right? He outshines Moses. He's bigger than Moses. And because Jesus is greater than Moses, Jesus is a better mediator. You see, Moses had to go up to the mountain as God's chosen person, hear from the Lord, come down, and then tell other people what God had said. But because we know Jesus Christ, because we are in Christ, we have access to God all the time. And listen, I want to take advantage of that access. You know, I love football, and every year I want to get NFL access, right? Every year it's too expensive. But every year I want to get NFL access because I can watch every NFL game. I can see every NFL touchdown. You know, if my kids get in the way, just kick them with the feet a little bit and they'll go to the other room. No. But I would just, every year I get hyped up about, I can't wait to get NFL access. And I never get it. But I can't wait to get NFL access because at the end of the day it's too expensive and I'm just going to be too cheap. All right? But listen, every day we should wake up thinking we have access to the very throne room of God through the person of Jesus Christ. And we need to take full advantage of that. We need to be excited about that. That should thrill us. That should fill us with a sort of joy that people cannot take away, that circumstances cannot take away. Hebrews chapter 4, verses 14 and 16, it says, since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession, for we don't have a high priest who's unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who is in every respect has been tempted like we are, yet without sin. Therefore, let us with confidence draw near to the throne of grace. We can be confident in approaching the throne room of God. And finally, I want to end with this point, is here on the mountain, God called Israel to be a kingdom of priests. He said, you're going to be my representatives. You're going to be my kingly priests. And through you, I'm going to show the world who I am. You're going to point the world to me because you're going to be different. You're going to live differently. And I want to say this, that not only is there, but now there's a new priesthood. And that's you and me, right? The Bible says that we believers, we're a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole Israel church thing, because that's not worth my time. But I will say this, look, but what the Bible does communicate definitely to us is that we are now God's image bearers, right? We are now the ones called to show the world what a different nation looks like. Being a Christian is a political statement. Every time we gather together, we are making a political statement that our king is not of this world, our kingdom is not of this world, and we don't owe allegiance to anybody else except Jesus Christ. And that's why it troubles me, this is a little bit of soapbox, that's why it troubles me when some Christians seem to be closely aligned to both, or one seems to be more important than the other. I will never understand that. Why? Because I only have one king, I only have one country, and that's Jesus Christ. And I'm a member of that kingdom. And then finally, we don't have to go up to a new mountain anymore to meet God. Why? Because we are the mountain. We are the mountain. You see, the mountain became the tabernacle. The tabernacle became the temple. And the Bible says that when the church gathers, that our body, is a temple of God's presence. A temple of God's Holy Spirit. And so when we get together, something powerful should be happening. When we get together as a church, there should be something different. There should be something unique about it. There should be something powerful about it. Now, I'm not talking about all this charismatas stuff that you want to get into or whatever. I mean, we can talk about that later. But I'm just saying when the church gets together, there should be a power there. It should be visible that God is present within us, that we are different than any other kind of gathering, that we are more special than any other kind of gathering, right? It shouldn't be boring. It shouldn't be a casual. But when we get together, that we are, because through Jesus Christ, we can, and through the Holy Spirit, we are both a new priesthood, but we're also the building. We're also the building. Right? So our job, as I think about all this, I just want you to renew that, just to think about that, we have to get our focus right on the Lord. Get your focus right on the Lord. Be aware that He's with you every single part of the day. Beware if you know Jesus Christ that He wants to get close to you. But listen, we also need to realize as a church that we have a special privileged access to God, to the Creator of the heavens and the earth. That I meant that when I was praying. I cannot believe that he hears my prayers. Like, that is unreal to me. Like, that is super special to me. I can't believe that when I pray that God hears me, and he wants to hear me. That's unbelievable. And listen, if we don't get that down, if we don't understand the wonder of that, the joy of that, the goodness of that, then there's not going to be very much power when we gather. When we gather. So I encourage you this week, maybe prepare for Sunday morning. Every day, yes, but maybe prepare for Sunday. Maybe come in ready to sing like you haven't sung in a while. Maybe have your devotion tomorrow and spend time in the Word like you haven't spent time in a while. Just get along with the Lord. He wants to know you. He wants to use us, and we need to let him do that.